be late. Talking about this.
Woo! Love Dropkick Murphy. They're awesome. But we're not here to talk about Dropkick Murphy and that crazy cool song called I'm Shipping Up to Boston, although I'd like to. We're going to talk about objects. Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. We're going to get down with objects. And you know what? This unit is going to be cool because you can use this unit as a reference. So as you create notes in this unit, before you turn them in, make a lot of comments in these notes so that you can just come back and use this as a great reference unit for future games that you create. I know you'll probably remember this a few months from now or whatever, but you know, some of the stuff you might forget. A year from now, you'll probably be forgetting a lot of the stuff just like I do. And you know, when you have a kind of a good reference library of your own, it's just much easier. You can create this stuff and knock these games out a lot faster. So make some notes and comments that are relevant to you, all right, so that you can you know, learn how to do this stuff. Objects are such an important part of game programming. To drive that home, that you know, that's what the type of programming languages that are out there today are. You know, we've got C++ or C# and Python and several other great languages that we can write code in. But all these languages, they have to meet this certain standard, and the standard kind of dictates what these programming languages look like. What's cool about object-oriented programming languages is that we can start focusing on objects and forget about the procedures. There's some rules, of course, that we got to use, but we can start thinking about the objects and what we want to do with these objects in our games. We can create these objects that are virtual objects that we know in our lives are things like maybe this pen here. So we know that we have a pen, and we could put it into a virtual world and say, let's go ahead and let's create a highlighter, if we will. And wow, look at that. I just created a virtual pen. So that's kind of like maybe a good scenario to show you that we can think about objects in a way of what we want to do with our code. Okay? Okay, now I've just been told that I've been driving a sports car and it dropped down to an automatic old car. So I'm getting some feedback on doing these recordings, and bear with me, I'm trying to get better at it as we go. So I'm going to step it up a few paces. Check it out. Stay with me, check it out. All right. What's an object? So come on over here. Derek, come on over. Let's talk about what's an object, Derek? An ActionScript is simply an entity that can have properties and methods attached, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So objects have types.
Yeah, they do.
Right? Like, I'm sure you have the types of people you like to hang around with, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the types of people you like?
People like John.
Like John. John's a type for sure. But, you know, with objects, we have types like arrays, numbers, text fields, and movie clips. All right?
Yeah.
Thanks, Derek. All right. So now we know that objects have types. Like John, we don't know you probably don't want to know the type that John is. But in any case, we know that they have types. Here's what's really cool is we can have custom-made object types. You know what? That's when you release the power of your ability to write code, is by making these custom objects. All right? Custom objects are so powerful because they allow you to encapsulate. Now, there's a word that sounds like a boring word, and so we can try to figure out, okay, what does encapsulate mean? All right, so here's Ian here. Scoot over here just a little bit, Ian. All right, so Ian is a perfect example of, he's going to show you what encapsulation is all about. Now, we really don't know what's going on in this great mind of Ian right here. All right, we all know he's a pretty handsome guy and all that stuff, but there's some brilliance that's happening inside of this head. So we don't even begin to understand how it works. So Ian is a creation all in himself. So we're going to encapsulate. He's going to encapsulate himself. So go ahead. There's Ian's capsule. So though we don't even see or recognize Ian here, we do know that there's brilliance inside that capsule. Thanks, Ian. You're awesome. What do you guys think?
That was great.
So we have to take a look at the difference between a global object and an instant object. Now, you know, you can't create instances of a global object, right? But you can use a global object in any timeline. And so a perfect example of a global object would be the math object. So we can use that object anywhere we want in our code. And it's always there for us. It's kind of like mom. She's always there for you, right? Well, math is kind of like mom in that sense. We can use the square root, logarithms, all these various methods that are attached to that global object. But the other type of object we have is an instance object. And so let's take a look at what an instance object does for us. Instance objects, they're used to create instances of themselves, and that's called class. Examples of classes are, besides myself being a classy guy that I am, is array, text field, and color. Now you don't use these objects except that you just use them to create new instances of your class. Here's an example right here. This is one that we've seen several times before. My array equals new array. So what's happening here is that this script creates a reference and assigns it a new object. So the object then is created with a call to the new operator, and that's followed by the object name with a parenthesis. Okay? So the new operator is really used to create a new instance of some kind of object. So in other words, okay, basically it's just telling Flash that, hey, what follows is an instance object name, and that we want a new instance of that object. So the parentheses that follow the object name are known or referred to as a constructor. Okay, simple as that. Let's look at constructors. Well, it's not a contractor that works on your home. That's different. This is called a constructor. And there's an example of several different types of objects that are being created with constructors. Here's some examples right here. The idea here is really that we're giving data to the object's constructor, and the job of the constructor is to set up the object of this instance that we want it to use. All right, so go ahead and take a moment, open up Flash, type in this code right here, and you'll see an example of a type of operator that's used to fill up these constructors. Okay, we'll figure out what the type of operator is going to do for us. Okay, so another thing that you got to remember about constructors is that they add memory. So that's a critical thing with games. When we're creating games and you have a bunch of constructors, you're like, say for example, we're constructing a bunch of aliens in a shooting game. Well, if we don't get rid of them, they're just going to, the memory is just going to grow and grow and grow, and the game ends up coming to a standstill. So what we have to do is we're going to have to eliminate or free up some of our memory. And so we have a thing that we can do to do that, and that's just simply called the delete operator. Here's an example for that. Go ahead and put this in your Flash and see what this does. This is an example where we're creating an array. We trace it out, and as you know, an array is an object. So we're creating an array object. We trace it out to show that it's there. Then we delete it and do a second trace and it's undefined. We won't be able to find it. Go ahead and try that now. Okay, notice the output here. We've got ABC on our first trace, like we expected, and then undefined. So we can see that the delete operator did in fact work. We deleted the array object just with this keyword called delete. Pretty simple, huh? And also pretty cool. All right, so another thing about these objects is that they can be divided in 5 primary groups. Now, 2 of the 5 are going to be the most important thing to focus in on in this class. So the core are the most important, and the movie clips objects are the most important. But we also got to remember that we have media, client-server, and authoring. And we'll be addressing those down the road when we talk about each of those in future sessions. But each group of objects can either be a global or they can be an instance object. Now what we've done is separated them out here. Here's the core at the top half of this sheet, and the movie objects on the bottom side. You can see on the core side there's only one global object, and that's the math. Under the movie clip side, though, we have a few other objects. We've got accessibility, key, mouse, selection, and stage. On the instance side of each, there are several instance objects that we can talk about. Now, I could actually talk about each one of these, and I do have several examples of these that we're going to go through. But I just want you to understand that this is the basic structure of these objects. Part of the core objects, now notice this ECMA thing, what that means is this is kind of like a standard, a world or global standard, if you will, for what constitutes an object-oriented programming language. So from this, that's where we get all this stuff. So these core objects, I've got a list of objects describing here whether they're an instance or a global object, and also a description of each. All right, so this again is something that you can just kind of review and then use it in the future as a reference. So there are some global core objects, you know, and the only core object that's global is the math object. And so here's some constants, the value, and the description of each. So this is kind of self-descriptive as well. So you can read through those and again use those for reference in the future. Here's some methods of the math object. As you can well imagine, if you used some of these already in previous games, but here's the method, and then here's a description of what it actually does. Okay, and we'll have some examples, and we'll use these. We're not going to go through every one of these, but we'll use these as we build future games and stuff. But you'll know where to reference it if you say, "Oh yeah, I remember something about that." Well, it's in this table. There's some trig functions, and they're listed here. They're functions, as you may or may not know, that trigonometry is a study of triangles. Okay, and the thing about triangles is that they have some special properties, so that we can relate the lengths of their sides to measure the 3 angles that they form. Well, these 7 functions that are listed at the top of this slide, they're going to allow us to perform the basic trigonometric functions. That'll be really important for us in the future. We're going to be doing, for example, stuff called like the distance formula. And the distance formula will have a thing called triangulation, and so we'll look at the proximity the mouse is to an object. So we can do some special things. So you don't have to worry about that just yet. Just at this point, just understand that there are all of these trig functions available to you. Then we have some exponent functions, and there's 4 of them here. These functions are used to calculate exponents, okay? And so the exp function raises this constant math e to some type of power. The log function calculates the natural log of a number. So here's an example. Go ahead and put this in, and you'll see that if we use the exponential function on the value of 32, we'll get a result, a long number result. When we trace out the log on value, our variable x, then we're going to see that this actually sets it back to the normal number. It does the inverse. The inverse of x happens. Right? Since there is only one global object, math, and that's in the core group, every other object that you come across will be an instant object. Okay? So we'll take a look at them. We'll first start taking a look at the arguments object. This object is technically an instance object because instances are created. You don't create them yourself. Flash creates an instance of the object for your inside any function call and names it arguments. You can define functions that take an infinite number of arguments. Thank you very much.
Like 4 million kids on YouTube.
Okay, so that was my version of my first attempt at rapping ever, and pretty darn good if I don't say myself. A little freestyle action. Anyway, we're talking about the arguments object, and you guys got my meaning behind that one. Anyway, here's a slide just in case. Hey, what would that rap be without something for you guys to do too? I've got a function here called the MultiMax. Awesome. Go ahead and put this into Flash and see what you guys come up with. So after that example, you probably should put it in. It should look something like this. This arguments object, this is called the MultiMax function that we created. This is a customized function that we're going to create. And one thing I need to point out here, notice that there's a var keyword inside this function. Well, with an ActionScript 2.0, you don't need to put this var keyword outside of functions like we have in the past. We haven't. If we want to create a variable, we just type the name in. But with ActionScript 3.0 and further, you have to use a var keyword every time you want to create a variable. Var space and then the variable name. In Action 2.0, it is required though inside a function. So that's why we have it here. So var, that's why that's there. If you were wondering about that, so we're creating a variable called tmax, and it equals something called arguments. And so anyway, you put this little code in, and what we're doing essentially is we're creating a MultiMax function that is going to take a whole string of numbers and is going to try to figure out, okay, what's our maximum amount of, what's the highest number of numbers that are in our list, and we'll trace it out. So that's essentially, that's the essence behind what this is. The return keyword is put in there for a reason as well, and so that we're telling our code to return a value from our tmax variable reference, because we're using the max object on our max function or method on our math object, and so we're assigning it to our tmax function reference. So we're returning the reference here so that we can use it. So if we didn't have this return keyword there, in other words, we wouldn't be able to use it at all. We wouldn't use this value that we're getting it back out of it. So that's how we're able to trace it out. So it's actually kind of a cool little bit of code here. So we have the arrays object, and we've spent a whole unit just dedicated to talking about arrays. If you have any further questions about arrays, just go ahead and go back to that unit and rework that. The next object that we're going to jump into is we're going to talk about the Boolean, but I'm going to save that for our next video session. So this will be the end of our first unit. Make sure you save your notes and add to them in the next video, so so you can have something cool to refer back to. So that's about it with our first unit here for talking about objects. Please make sure you take this stuff, this all fun and nonsense that we're doing seriously, though, and remember that objects are really the true power of programming, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys and then join us on our next video session. Who knows, it could even get crazier.